There's a weight most people carry their entire lives without ever naming it. It's not visible. It's not dramatic. But it's there, pressed against their chest, wrapped around their thoughts, woven into every decision they make. It's the weight of holding on to what was said, holding on to who left, holding on to the version of themselves they think they should have been by now, holding on to outcomes they can't control, to people who've already moved on, to pain that's long stopped serving them. And the tragedy is, they think this weight is loyalty. They think it's love. They think it's strength. But it's not. It's exhaustion, disguised as commitment. Imagine what it would feel like to finally put it down. Not all at once, not violently, but gently, intentionally, the way you'd set down something fragile that no longer belongs to you. Imagine waking up without replaying yesterday's conversation. Imagine loving someone without needing them to complete you. Imagine wanting something deeply, but being at peace if it never arrives. That's not detachment. That's freedom. And most people never experience it because they've confused letting go with giving up. They think release means defeat, that if they stop holding on, they'll lose themselves entirely. But the opposite is true. The tighter you hold, the more you disappear. Because when your hands are full of what no longer serves you, there's no space left for what could. Think about the last time you tried to hold water in your fists. The harder you squeezed, the faster it slipped away. That's what happens when you cling to control, to certainty, to people, to the past. Life isn't meant to be gripped. It's meant to be lived, openly, fluidly, with hands that can hold, but also release. Yet most of us walk through life with clenched fists and tight chests, convinced that if we just hold on a little longer, things will go back to how they were. But they won't. And deep down, we know that. We just don't know how to let go without feeling like we're losing. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood concepts in human experience. People think it means you stop caring, that you become cold, distant, indifferent, that you walk away from everything that ever mattered. But that's not letting go. That's numbing. That's shutting down. Letting go is the opposite. It's caring so deeply that you refuse to let attachment turn into suffering. It's loving so fully that you don't need to own what you love. It's wanting something with your whole heart and still being able to say, if it's not meant for me, I trust what is. Most people spend years, sometimes decades, carrying things that were only meant to be lessons, not luggage. A relationship that ended 5 years ago still occupies space in their mind. A mistake they made once becomes a story they tell themselves every day. A dream that didn't work out turns into evidence that they're not enough. And slowly, invisibly, they stop moving forward. Not because they can't, but because they're too heavy. The weight of the past becomes the anchor of the present. And the future? It starts to look like a blurred version of yesterday. But here's the truth most people never hear. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't love deeply. It doesn't mean it didn't matter. It doesn't mean you're weak or that you failed. Letting go means you loved yourself enough to stop drowning in what's already gone. It means you respected the lesson enough to stop repeating it. It means you trusted life enough to believe that what's meant for you won't require you to beg, chase, or break yourself to keep it. This audiobook is about reclaiming that trust. The trust in yourself to release what no longer aligns. The trust in life to bring you what does. the trust in time to heal what words cannot. It's about learning the difference between surrender and defeat, between release and rejection, between moving on and running away. Because the art of letting go isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming free. Free from the stories that no longer serve you. Free from the people who no longer see you. Free from the versions of yourself you've outgrown. You'll learn why the mind holds on even when the heart wants to release. You'll discover the emotional patterns that keep you stuck in cycles of attachment. You'll understand the biology of grief, the psychology of closure, and the spirituality of surrender. You'll see that letting go isn't a single act. It's a practice, a daily choice to honor what was without letting it define what is. And by the end of this audiobook, you'll realize something profound. You were never meant to carry everything. Some things are meant to be held. Others are meant to be felt and released. The wisdom is knowing which is which. So take a breath, not to prepare for something hard, but to remind yourself of something true. You are not what you've lost. You are not the mistakes you've made. You are not defined by who stayed or who left. You are the awareness that remains after everything else falls away. You are the space that holds it all without being consumed by any of it. And that space, it's unbreakable. So let's begin. Not by forcing release, but by understanding why you've been holding on. Because once you see the pattern, the grip loosens naturally. And when the grip loosens, life flows again. Let's start. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Control. Every human being is born into the same fundamental truth. We control almost nothing. Not the weather, not other people, not time, not life's timing, not outcomes, not how we're perceived, not who stays, not what leaves. And yet, from the moment we develop consciousness, we spend our entire lives fighting this truth. We build elaborate systems of control. We plan, predict, manage, manipulate. We convince ourselves that if we just work hard enough, think smart enough, love deeply enough, we can bend reality to our will. And for a while, it works. Or, at least it seems to. We get the job, the relationship forms, the plan unfolds, and we mistake temporary alignment for permanent control. But then something shifts. The job ends. The relationship breaks. The plan crumbles. And suddenly, the illusion shatters. We realize we were never in control. We were just moving through a moment where life happened to flow in our direction. And the moment it stopped, we felt powerless, betrayed, lost. Because we built our entire sense of safety on something that was never ours to hold. Certainty. Control is the most seductive illusion the mind creates. It promises safety. It whispers, if you can just manage this, predict that, avoid this, ensure that, you'll be okay. And so we spend our energy trying to control the uncontrollable. We try to control how people see us, so we perform. We try to control outcomes, so we obsess over details. We try to control loss, so we cling to what we have. We try to control time, so we rush or resist. We exhaust ourselves in a battle we were never meant to win. Think of someone you know who's always anxious. Not because their life is falling apart, but because they need everything to go exactly as planned. They can't relax until every detail is managed, every variable accounted for, every person behaving as expected. They've built a glass castle of control, and they spend every waking moment trying to keep it from shattering. That's not strength. That's terror. Because deep down, They know the truth. One unexpected event, one change, one loss, and it all falls apart. Control feels like power, but it's actually fear wearing a mask. It's the ego's desperate attempt to avoid the vulnerability of being human. Now imagine a different person. Someone who's been through loss, failure, disappointment, but instead of tightening their grip, they loosened it. Instead of trying harder to control, they learned to trust more deeply. They still plan. They still work. They still care. But they're no longer attached to outcomes. They hold their goals lightly. They love without ownership. They give without expectation. And because of that, they move through life with a kind of ease that others can't understand. They're not careless. They're free. Free from the exhausting need to control what was never theirs to control. The difference between these two people isn't luck. It's understanding. The anxious person believes control equals safety. The free person knows that acceptance equals peace. And peace, unlike control, doesn't depend on external circumstances. It depends on internal surrender. Surrender is the word that makes most people uncomfortable. It sounds like weakness, like giving up, like letting life walk all over you. But that's not what surrender means. Surrender doesn't mean you stop trying. It means you stop forcing. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It doesn't mean you accept harm. It means you accept reality as it is before you decide how to move through it. Surrender is the moment you realize that resisting what's already happened doesn't change it. It just doubles your suffering. When you fight reality, you lose every time. Not because you're weak, but because reality doesn't negotiate. It simply is. And the more you resist, the more exhausted you become. Letting go of control begins with a simple acknowledgement. I cannot control this. Not with anger, not with fear, not with wishful thinking. Just the truth, spoken plainly. I cannot control how this person feels. I cannot control what happened. I cannot control what comes next. That acknowledgement isn't defeat. It's clarity. And clarity is the first step toward freedom. Let me tell you about a man named David. David spent his entire career building a business. He poured everything into it: time, money, relationships, health. The business was his identity, his worth, his proof that he mattered. And for years, it thrived, until it didn't. The market shifted. A competitor emerged. Clients left. Revenue dropped. David worked harder, longer hours, more pressure, more control. He micromanaged every detail, convinced that if he just tried harder, he could force success. But the harder he gripped, the faster things slipped away. Employees quit. Partners distanced themselves. His health declined. And one day, sitting alone in his office at 2 a.m., staring at numbers that wouldn't improve, he broke. Not because the business failed, but because he realized he'd spent years building his entire sense of self on something he could never fully control. That breaking was the beginning of his freedom, because in that moment of collapse, he stopped fighting. He stopped pretending he could force outcomes. He stopped believing his worth was tied to success. He let go. Not of effort, but of attachment. He continued to work, but differently. He made decisions without panic. He tried new strategies without desperation. He cared about the outcome, but didn't need it to validate him. And something strange happened. The business didn't magically recover, but he did. He started sleeping again, laughing again, connecting with people again. He rebuilt, but this time on a foundation of acceptance, not control. And when the next challenge came, he didn't crumble. because his peace was no longer conditional. That's what letting go of control looks like. It's not passivity. It's perspective. It's the difference between white-knuckling life and open-handing it. White-knuckling says, it has to be this way, or I'm not okay. Open-handing says, I prefer this, but I'll be okay either way. One leads to chronic anxiety. The other leads to resilient peace. The mind hates this. The ego despises it, because the ego's entire job is to protect you by predicting and controlling. It scans for threats. It plans escapes. It builds walls. And when you tell it, we're going to stop trying to control everything, it panics. It throws up every worst-case scenario it can imagine. It says, if you let go, you'll lose everything. But here's the paradox the ego doesn't understand. The tighter you grip, the more you lose. Control creates rigidity, and rigidity breaks under pressure. Flexibility survives. When you stop trying to control every variable, you start adapting to the ones that matter. You stop wasting energy on battles you can't win and start investing in the responses you can choose. You can't control the storm, but you can control whether you stand in the rain, screaming at the sky, or find shelter and wait for it to pass. You can't control whether people leave, but you can control whether you let their leaving define your worth. You can't control failure, but you can control whether failure becomes a gravestone or a stepping stone. This shift requires brutal honesty. You have to look at your life and ask, what am I trying to control that I actually can't? Write it down. Every relationship you're trying to manage, every outcome you're obsessing over, every future you're trying to script. Then ask, what would happen if I let go? Not gave up. Let go. The answer is usually surprising. What would happen is you'd stop suffering twice. Once for the thing itself and once for the fight against it. You'd stop exhausting yourself trying to change what is and start using that energy to create what could be. You'd discover that peace isn't found in controlling life. It's found in trusting yourself to handle whatever life brings. Letting go of control doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become powerful in the right way. You stop trying to control externals and start mastering internals. You can't control the job offer, but you can control your preparation. You can't control whether someone loves you, but you can control whether you love yourself. You can't control the diagnosis, but you can control how you meet it. That's real power. Not dominance over circumstances, but sovereignty over self. And once you taste that kind of power, the old kind stops looking appealing. Because the old kind was exhausting. It required constant vigilance, endless effort, and it never actually worked. The new kind, it requires presence, awareness, and trust. And it works every time. Here's the secret no one tells you. Life gets easier when you stop trying to control it. Not because challenges disappear, but because you stop making them harder than they need to be. You stop arguing with reality. You stop replaying what already happened. You stop rehearsing what might happen. You meet the moment as it is. And in that meeting, you find something unexpected. Flow. Flow is what happens when control releases. It's the experience of moving through life with ease, even when things are hard. It's making decisions without agonizing. It's facing loss without collapsing. It's wanting without attachment. It's loving without possession. It's the art of living fully without gripping tightly. Athletes call it the zone. Musicians call it improvisation. Mystics call it surrender. But it's all the same thing. the state of being so present, so aligned, so trusting that you stop fighting and start flowing. And you can't flow while controlling. You can only flow while releasing. So here's your first practice. Identify one thing you've been trying to control that's making you miserable. Just one. Maybe it's how someone feels about you. Maybe it's a situation at work. Maybe it's a past mistake you keep trying to undo in your mind. Name it. Then say out loud, I release my need to control this. I acknowledge I cannot change it through force. I trust myself to handle whatever unfolds. Say it once. Breathe. Say it again. Notice what happens in your body. You might feel resistance. That's the ego fighting. Or you might feel relief. That's your soul recognizing truth. Either way, you've taken the first step. Because letting go of control isn't a one-time event. It's a daily practice, a moment-by-moment choice to stop gripping what you were never meant to hold. And every time you make that choice, you get lighter. The weight lifts. The anxiety softens. The space opens. And in that space, you rediscover something beautiful. Life doesn't need to be controlled to be good. It just needs to be lived, fully, bravely, openly. Let's continue. Chapter 2. Why the mind holds on. If letting go is so freeing, why is it so hard? Why do we cling to relationships that hurt us? Why do we replay conversations that ended years ago? Why do we hold grudges, nurse wounds, and carry regrets like badges of honor? The answer isn't weakness. It's wiring. Your brain wasn't designed for peace. It was designed for survival. And survival, in the mind's ancient logic, means one thing: avoid loss at all costs. To understand why you hold on, you have to understand how your brain interprets attachment. Every connection you make, whether to a person, a place, a belief, or a version of yourself, creates a neural pathway. The more you invest emotionally, the stronger that pathway becomes. Eventually, that connection becomes part of your identity map. It's how your brain answers the question, who am I? When you lose something, you're not just losing the thing. You're losing a piece of the map. And the brain interprets that as danger. It says, if I lose this, I lose myself. That's why breakups feel like death. Why job loss feels like failure. Why change, even positive change, feels threatening. The mind equates familiarity with safety. And safety, to the primitive brain, is survival. So even when something is toxic, painful, or finished, the brain resists letting it go. Because the known pain feels safer than the unknown freedom. This is why people stay in relationships long after love has left. Why they keep jobs that drain them. Why they cling to identities that no longer fit. It's not that they don't want to leave. It's that leaving feels like dying. The brain's attachment system runs on a chemical called oxytocin. It's released during bonding, touch, connection. It's beautiful when it's working for you. But it's devastating when it works against you. Because oxytocin doesn't distinguish between healthy and unhealthy bonds. It just bonds. So you can be chemically attached to someone who's terrible for you. Your brain floods with bonding hormones even when your heart is breaking. That's why people say, I know I should leave, but I can't. They're not weak. They're chemically bound. And breaking that bond requires more than willpower. It requires rewiring. There's another system at play, the brain's pattern recognition engine. Your mind is always scanning for patterns because patterns predict outcomes. And predictability, again, equals safety. So when you meet someone who reminds you of a parent, the brain lights up. Familiar. When you encounter a situation similar to something from your past, the brain says, I know this story. Even if the story ended badly, the brain prefers it to the unknown. This is why people repeat the same relationship dynamics over and over. Why they keep choosing the same type of partner who hurts them the same way. It's not self-sabotage. It's pattern recognition. The brain is trying to resolve an old story by replaying it, hoping for a different ending. But the ending never changes until the pattern is seen. That's the key. Awareness. You can't break a cycle you don't recognize. And most people never recognize it because they're too close to it. They think each relationship is different. Each job is different. Each situation is unique. But underneath, the structure is identical. The names change. The settings shift. But the emotional script remains the same. Here's an example. A woman named Clara kept dating men who seemed perfect at first, attentive, charming, present. But within months, they'd become distant, unavailable, critical. And every time, Clara would work harder to win them back. She'd be more understanding, more accommodating, more forgiving. Anything to keep them from leaving. But they always did. And every time, she'd tell herself, I just need to find the right person. One day, during therapy, her counselor asked a simple question. What was your relationship with your father like? Clara froze. Her father had been emotionally distant, present physically, but absent emotionally. As a child, she'd tried everything to get his attention. Be perfect, be helpful, be invisible. Nothing worked. He was always somewhere else. And without realizing it, Clara had been recreating that dynamic her entire adult life. She kept choosing men who were emotionally unavailable because unavailability was familiar. Her brain recognized the pattern and said, this feels like home. The breakthrough came when Clara realized she wasn't looking for love. She was looking for resolution. She was trying to fix the past by repeating it in the present. And the moment she saw that clearly, the pattern lost its power. She stopped choosing those men, not through force, but through awareness. Her brain no longer interpreted unavailability as attractive. It recognized it as a red flag. That's the power of seeing the pattern. It breaks the loop. But most people never see it. They just keep replaying, wondering why nothing changes. The mind also holds on because of something called the sunk cost fallacy. The more you invest in something, the harder it is to walk away. Time, energy, money, emotion, all of it becomes evidence that you can't quit now. You tell yourself, I've already given so much. If I leave now, it was all for nothing. But that's flawed logic. The investment is already gone. You can't get it back by investing more. All you're doing is throwing good energy after bad. The past is a sunk cost. What matters is the present. And in the present, the question isn't, how much have I invested? It's, is this still serving me? If the answer is no, the investment doesn't matter. Leaving isn't losing. It's learning. It's saying, I valued this once, and now I value myself more. Yet people stay in dead-end jobs, toxic friendships, and broken relationships for years because they can't let go of what they've already given. They mistake endurance for loyalty, suffering for commitment. But there's no honor in staying where you're not growing. There's only stagnation. Then there's the fear of regret. The mind tortures itself with questions. What if I'm wrong? What if I let go and then realize I made a mistake? What if this was actually the right thing and I just gave up too soon? These questions paralyze decision-making. Because the brain hates uncertainty more than it hates pain. At least with pain, you know what you're dealing with. With uncertainty, anything could happen. So people stay stuck in the middle, neither fully committed nor fully released. They linger in the gray zone of maybe, hoping clarity will eventually arrive. But clarity doesn't come from waiting. It comes from deciding. Even if the decision is wrong, at least you're moving. And movement creates information. You learn what works and what doesn't. But waiting teaches you nothing except how to stay paralyzed. The mind also holds on to protect the ego, because letting go often requires admitting you were wrong, that you misjudged someone, that you stayed too long, that you ignored red flags, and the ego hates being wrong. It would rather suffer in a bad situation than admit it made a mistake. So it rationalizes, it minimizes, it makes excuses. It's not that bad. Everyone has problems. Maybe I'm too picky. The ego rewrites reality to protect itself, and in doing so, it traps you in situations that should have ended long ago. But here's the truth. Admitting you were wrong isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's growth. It's the ego stepping aside so the soul can lead. Finally, the mind holds on because of grief. Letting go means acknowledging that something is over. And endings, even necessary ones, hurt. They require mourning, and mourning is uncomfortable. So people avoid it. They stay half in, half out, never fully releasing, because releasing means feeling the loss fully. But grief doesn't go away by avoiding it. It just goes underground. It becomes anxiety, depression, numbness, chronic tension. The only way out of grief is through it. You have to feel the loss, cry the tears, sit with the emptiness. And on the other side of that feeling is freedom. But most people never get there because they won't let themselves feel. They distract, they minimize, they move on too fast, and the grief stays, unprocessed, waiting. So why does the mind hold on? Because it's scared. Scared of loss, scared of change, scared of the unknown, scared of being alone, scared of regret, scared of grief, scared of uncertainty. And beneath all that fear is one core belief. I won't be okay without this. But that belief is a lie. You've survived every loss you've ever experienced, every ending, every disappointment. You're still here, still breathing, still capable. The truth is, you're more resilient than your mind believes. And letting go doesn't destroy you. It reveals the strength that was always there, hidden beneath the fear, waiting to be trusted. Chapter 3. The Weight of Unfinished Endings. Some endings are clean. A door closes. A chapter ends. The story is told, and everyone moves on. But most endings aren't like that. Most endings are messy, incomplete, unspoken. Someone leaves without explanation. A relationship fades without closure. A dream dies without understanding why. And you're left holding the pieces, trying to make sense of something that will never make sense. These are the endings that haunt us, not because they were the worst things that ever happened, but because they were never finished. The brain craves completion. It's wired to close loops, to finish patterns, to resolve tension. That's why cliffhangers drive you crazy. Why unfinished tasks nag at you. Why you can't stop thinking about a conversation that ended mid-sentence. The mind needs closure. And when it doesn't get it, it creates a background process that runs constantly, consuming energy, replaying scenarios, searching for the ending it never received. Think about the last time someone important to you just disappeared. No fight, no explanation. They were just gone. You probably spent weeks, maybe months, trying to understand what happened. You replayed every conversation, analyzed every text, searched for clues. You asked yourself what you did wrong, what you could have done differently, what you missed. But no answer ever came. And the not knowing became its own kind of torture. Because without closure, the mind can't file the experience away. It can't categorize it as complete. So it stays open, active, unresolved. And every time something reminds you of that person, the wound reopens. Unfinished endings create what psychologists call ambiguous loss. It's loss without clarity, grief without permission. You didn't lose the person to death, so you feel like you're not allowed to mourn. But they're gone, so you can't move forward. You're stuck in the middle, neither here nor there. And that middle space is exhausting. It's where most people live when they can't let go. They're not fully present in their current life because part of them is still waiting for the past to explain itself. Closure is a myth. That's the hard truth. You think if you could just have one more conversation, one more explanation, one more chance to say what you need to say, you'd be able to move on. But you wouldn't, because closure doesn't come from other people. It comes from you. Other people can give you information. They can tell you why they left, what they felt, what went wrong. But they can't give you peace. Peace is an inside job. It's the moment you stop needing their explanation and start writing your own ending. It's the moment you say, I may never understand why, and that's okay. I'm choosing to close this chapter myself. That choice is terrifying because it means accepting uncertainty. It means acknowledging that some questions will never be answered. Some wounds will never be explained. Some people will never come back and say the words you need to hear, and you have to be okay anyway. Let me tell you about a woman named Maya. She was in a relationship for 4 years. They talked about marriage, built a life together. And then one day, he ended it. No warning, no explanation. Just, I can't do this anymore. Maya was shattered, not just because the relationship ended, but because it made no sense. Everything had seemed fine. There were no fights, no betrayals, just silence, and then nothing. She spent months trying to get answers. She called, she texted, she wrote letters, but he never explained. He just moved on as if those 4 years never existed. And Maya couldn't. She was trapped in the unanswered why. 2 years later, she was still thinking about him daily, still searching for the reason, still replaying every memory, looking for the moment it went wrong. Her friends told her to move on, but she couldn't, because in her mind, the story wasn't over. It was paused, waiting for the ending it never got. Then one day, something shifted. Maya was walking in a park, and she saw a couple sitting on a bench. They looked happy, connected, and she realized something. She'd spent 2 years waiting for him to give her closure, but he never would. Not because he was cruel, but because he didn't have the answer either. Maybe he didn't know why he left. Maybe he was just as confused. Maybe there was no reason. And in that moment, Maya decided to write her own ending. She went home and wrote a letter, not to him, but to herself. In it, she said everything she'd been waiting to hear. She forgave herself for not seeing it coming. She released him from the obligation to explain. She thanked the relationship for what it taught her. And then she burned the letter. As she watched the paper turn to ash, something inside her let go. The weight lifted. The loop closed. Not because she got the answers, but because she stopped needing them. She gave herself the closure he never could. That's the power of self-generated closure. It doesn't require anyone's participation. It doesn't wait for permission. It's a unilateral decision to finish the story yourself. But it requires something difficult. Acceptance. Not acceptance that what happened was okay. Acceptance that it happened. Full stop. No conditions, no qualifications. It happened. And no amount of analysis will unhappen it. Acceptance is the difference between I can't believe this happened and this happened, and I'm moving forward anyway. One keeps you stuck. The other sets you free. Unfinished endings also create emotional debt. You feel like you're owed something, an apology, an explanation, acknowledgement, and until you receive it, you can't let go. But here's the truth. You don't need what you think you need. You think you need their apology to forgive. But forgiveness is for you, not them. You think you need their explanation to understand, but understanding comes from within, not from them. You think you need their acknowledgement to validate your pain. But your pain is valid because you felt it, not because they admit it. Waiting for someone else to finish your story gives them power they don't deserve. It makes your peace conditional on their actions. And they may never act. They may never apologize, never explain, never acknowledge. And if your healing depends on them, you'll wait forever. So you take the power back. You close the loop yourself. You write the final chapter. You say, this is done. Not because I got what I needed from them, but because I'm giving it to myself. That's not bitterness. That's sovereignty. It's reclaiming your narrative from people who stop participating in your story. Here's a practice for unfinished endings. Write the closure letter. Address it to the person, situation, or version of yourself you need to release. Write everything you wish you could say. Everything you wish they'd said to you. Don't hold back. Let it pour out. Then make a choice. Either send it or don't. Sometimes sending it brings peace. Sometimes it reopens wounds. Trust your instinct. But whether you send it or not, the act of writing it gives you the release you've been seeking. Because the words needed to be spoken, even if only to yourself. And once they're out, they stop circling in your mind. The loop closes. The weight lifts. The ending finally arrives. Unfinished endings taught me this. You don't need other people to validate your experience for it to be complete. You don't need them to apologize for you to forgive. You don't need them to come back for you to move on. You are the author of your story. And when someone leaves the narrative without finishing their part, you don't stop writing. You write them out, gently, gratefully, and you continue. Because your story is bigger than the people who couldn't stay to see it unfold. Let's move forward. Chapter 4. The Art of Releasing People. There's a particular kind of pain that only comes from holding on to people who've already left. Not physically left, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually. They're still in your phone, maybe still in your life, but the connection you once had is gone. You feel it. The conversations that used to flow now feel forced. The comfort that used to be automatic now requires effort. The ease is gone, replaced by distance. And yet, you hold on. You keep reaching out. Keep hoping they'll return. Keep pretending the relationship is still what it used to be. But it's not. And deep down, you know that. Releasing people is one of the hardest forms of letting go. Because unlike situations or dreams, people are alive, dynamic. They can come back. And that possibility, that tiny sliver of hope keeps you attached. You tell yourself, maybe they're just going through something. Maybe they'll remember what we had. Maybe if I just give them time, space, love, they'll return. But months pass, years pass, and they don't. Or if they do, it's not the same. Because people don't return to where they left. They return as who they've become. And sometimes, who they've become doesn't fit with who you are anymore. The painful truth is this: not everyone who starts your journey is meant to finish it. Some people are chapters, not the whole book. They enter your life to teach you something, to share something, to grow something. And when that purpose is complete, they leave. Not because you failed, not because you weren't enough, but because their role in your story is done. The mistake most people make is trying to keep chapter people in their lives forever. They turn a beautiful, complete chapter into a painful, dragged-out epilogue. They cling to what was instead of honoring what it became. And in doing so, they miss the lesson the ending was supposed to teach. Think about the people in your life right now. How many of them are there out of genuine connection, and how many are there out of obligation? How many relationships are you maintaining not because they bring you joy, but because you feel guilty letting them go? How many conversations are you having not because you want to, but because you feel like you should? That weight, that obligation, that guilt-driven connection, it's not love. It's loyalty to a memory. And memories, no matter how beautiful, are not meant to be lived in. Here's the hardest part. Sometimes the people you need to release are good people. They didn't betray you. They didn't hurt you intentionally. They just grew in a different direction. And now your paths, once parallel, are diverging. There's no villain in this story. Just two people who loved each other in one season and outgrew each other in the next. That kind of ending is harder than betrayal. Because betrayal gives you anger to fuel the release. But when someone is still good, still kind, still caring, but no longer right, you have nothing to push against. You just have the quiet, aching truth. This isn't working anymore. I'll tell you about a friendship I once had. Her name was Elena. We met in college. Instant connection. Same humor, same values, same dreams. For years, we were inseparable. Late-night conversations, shared secrets, unshakable loyalty. We said we'd be friends forever, and we meant it. But then life moved us in different directions. She got married. I stayed single. She wanted kids. I wanted travel. She prioritized stability. I chased growth. Slowly, the calls became less frequent. The conversations more surface. We tried to keep it alive. We planned meetups that felt forced. We texted on birthdays. We liked each other's posts. But the depth was gone. One day, I realized I was holding on not because the friendship was still fulfilling, but because I was terrified of losing what we once had. I was clinging to the memory of the connection, not the reality of it. And that realization broke my heart, because it meant I had to let her go. Not dramatically, not with a final conversation, just quietly. I stopped forcing the connection, stopped reaching out of obligation. I sent love from a distance and released the expectation that we'd be what we once were. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also freed us both. Because sometimes love means letting people be who they're becoming, even if that means they become someone who's no longer in your life. Releasing people doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care enough to stop forcing. You care enough to honor the truth. You care enough to let the relationship be what it is, not what you wish it was, because forcing connection creates resentment, and resentment poisons the memory of what once was. Better to release with love and keep the memory pure than to hold on with bitterness and taint what was beautiful. But the mind resists this. It says, if I let them go, it means I didn't fight hard enough. It means I gave up. But that's not true. Sometimes releasing someone is the most loving thing you can do. Not just for you, but for them. Because when you release them, you free them from the burden of being who they used to be. You give them permission to evolve. And you give yourself permission to do the same. There's a practice I learned years ago. It's called the loving release. When you realize someone needs to be let go, you sit in stillness. You bring them to mind. You feel all the love you have for them, all the gratitude, all the memories. And then you say, silently or aloud, I release you with love. I honor what we shared. I bless who you're becoming. And I free us both from the expectation of who we used to be. Thank you for your part in my story. I let you go. You might need to repeat this multiple times because the mind will try to pull them back. But each time you do it, the grip loosens. The attachment softens. And eventually, you're no longer holding on. You're simply remembering with gratitude. Releasing people also means releasing their potential. We often hold on not to who someone is, but to who we hope they'll become. We see their potential, their capacity, what they could be if they just tried, if they just healed, if they just changed. And we wait. We invest. We pour love into them, believing that our love will be the catalyst for their transformation. But it won't. People don't change because you love them. They change because they choose to. And if they're not choosing it, your love, no matter how deep, won't force it. You can't save people from themselves. You can only love yourself enough not to drown trying. So you release their potential. You stop waiting for them to become who you need them to be. You accept them as they are. And if who they are isn't compatible with who you're becoming, you let them go. Not with anger, not with judgment, just with clarity. Because your life is too short, too precious, too full of possibility to spend it waiting for people to meet you where you already are. Releasing people is an act of self-love disguised as loss. It feels like you're losing, but you're actually gaining space, gaining energy, gaining clarity, gaining the freedom to connect with people who are actually present, who see you, who choose you actively, not passively. And here's what happens when you start releasing people with love. You make room. Room for new connections, new friendships, new love. Room for people who are aligned with who you're becoming, not who you used to be. The universe doesn't fill a space that's already occupied. So when you keep holding on to people who've already left, you block the new ones from entering. But when you release, when you create space, new energy flows in. And often, it's better than what you let go. Not because the old people were bad, but because the new people are right for the current version of you. Let me be clear. Releasing someone doesn't mean you erase them from your heart. Some people will live there forever. And that's okay. You can love someone and still let them go. You can honor what was and still move forward. You can miss someone and still know that releasing them was right. These things coexist. Love and release. Gratitude and goodbye. Memory and movement. The heart is big enough to hold it all. But sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is love someone from a distance. Not because you're angry, not because you don't care, but because proximity was hurting you both. And love, real love, knows when to hold on and when to let go. So ask yourself, who am I holding on to out of obligation? Who have I already lost but refused to release? Who am I waiting for that isn't coming back? And then, gently, lovingly, with full gratitude for what was, let them go. Not with bitterness, not with drama, just with the quiet knowing that their chapter in your story is complete. And that's okay. Because your story continues, with or without them. And the people meant to walk the next chapter with you are already on their way. Let's keep moving. Chapter 5. The Freedom in Uncertainty. Most people spend their entire lives trying to predict the future. They plan every detail. They create backup plans for their backup plans. They map out their lives in 5-year increments, convinced that if they can just see what's coming, they'll be safe. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. You can't predict anything. Not really. You can plan. You can prepare. You can make educated guesses. But you cannot know what's coming. And the moment you accept that, something shifts. The anxiety doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It stops being the enemy and becomes information. A signal that you're trying to control something you were never meant to control. The future. Uncertainty is the most uncomfortable state the human mind can experience. It's worse than pain. At least with pain, you know what you're dealing with. You can name it, measure it, develop a response. But uncertainty? It's shapeless, formless. It could become anything. And the mind, desperate for control, fills that void with stories, usually bad ones, because the brain's primary job is threat detection, not optimism. So when the future is uncertain, your mind doesn't imagine the best-case scenario. It imagines catastrophe. It rehearses disaster. It prepares for the worst because preparation feels like control. But rehearsing disaster doesn't protect you. It exhausts you. You live through the trauma twice, once in your imagination and once if it actually happens. And most of the time, it doesn't. Most of the disasters you've rehearsed never occurred. Most of the fears you've entertained never materialized. You spent all that energy, all that mental space, preparing for something that never came. And in doing so, you missed the present, the only moment that's actually real. Think about the last time you were waiting for important news, a job decision, a health result, a relationship answer. Remember how that uncertainty felt? How it consumed your thoughts? How you couldn't focus on anything else? You were physically present, but mentally absent, living in the future, rehearsing every outcome. And none of it changed what was going to happen. The news arrived when it arrived, and you dealt with it, just like you've dealt with everything else. That's the paradox of uncertainty. We fear it desperately, but we're remarkably good at handling it. You've survived every uncertain moment you've ever lived through. Every job loss, every move, every breakup, every plot twist. You didn't know how it would turn out, but you figured it out anyway. You adapted, you learned, you survived, and you'll do it again. Because you're more resilient than your anxiety believes. The problem isn't uncertainty. The problem is your relationship with it. You treat it like an enemy. Something to avoid, something to fear. But what if it's not? What if uncertainty is actually the space where possibility lives, where growth happens, where life unfolds exactly as it's meant to? Let me tell you about a man named James. James was a planner. He had his entire life mapped out by age 25. Career trajectory, financial milestones, marriage timeline. Everything was structured, predictable, safe. And for a while, It worked. He got the degree, the job, the promotion. He was right on schedule. Until he wasn't. At 32, he got laid off. Budget cuts. Nothing personal. But to James, it was devastation. Because it wasn't in the plan. He had no map for this. No 5-year strategy. For the first time in his life, James was facing true uncertainty. And it terrified him. For weeks, he spiraled. He applied to hundreds of jobs. He networked desperately. He clung to the idea that if he just worked hard enough, he could force certainty. He could get back on track. But nothing came through. The rejections piled up. And James, exhausted from fighting the uncertainty, finally collapsed into it. He stopped applying. He stopped planning. He just sat with a not knowing. And in that stillness, something unexpected happened. He remembered an old passion, photography, something he'd loved in college but abandoned for the practical path. With nothing else to do, he started shooting again, just for himself. No pressure, no plan, just the joy of creating. Months passed. His photos got noticed. Someone offered him freelance work. Then another offer. Then another. Within a year, James had built a career he never planned for. One that brought him more fulfillment than the structured path ever did. And none of it would have happened if he hadn't lost control, if the uncertainty hadn't forced him off the map. Looking back, James realized the layoff wasn't a disaster. It was a redirection. The universe closing one door because he never would have opened another. That's what uncertainty does. It destroys the plans that were limiting you and creates space for the life you couldn't have imagined. But you can't receive that gift if you're fighting the uncertainty. If you're white-knuckling life, trying to force it back into predictability, you have to surrender into the not knowing. Not passively, but actively. You have to trust that even though you can't see the path, there is one. And it will reveal itself step by step. Not all at once. Never all at once. Just enough light for the next step. That's how life works. It doesn't give you the whole map. It gives you a flashlight. And you have to trust that the flashlight is enough. This is where faith comes in. Not religious faith necessarily, though it can be. But faith in the process. Faith that life is unfolding for you, not to you. Faith that what's meant for you won't miss you. Faith that even when you can't see the reason, there is one. Faith doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It changes how you hold it. Instead of gripping it with fear, you hold it with openness. You say, I don't know what's coming, and that's okay. I trust myself to handle it. That shift is everything, because it moves you from victim to participant, from passive to empowered. Uncertainty also teaches you to live in the present, because the present is the only place where certainty exists. Right now, in this exact moment, you're okay. You're breathing. You're here. The future hasn't happened yet. The past is gone. The only real moment is now. And now is always manageable. It's when you project into tomorrow, next week, next year, that anxiety takes over. Because you're trying to live a moment that doesn't exist. But when you come back to now, to this breath, this heartbeat, this single moment, you find that you're okay. You've always been okay. In the now. There's a meditation practice that helps with this. When anxiety about the future rises, pause. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat and ask yourself, right now, in this exact moment, am I okay? Not in an hour, not tomorrow, right now. The answer is almost always yes. Right now, you're safe. Right now, you have what you need. Right now, you're breathing. That awareness brings you back to center. It reminds you that most of your suffering lives in an imagined future, not the actual present. And when you return to the present, repeatedly, the hold that uncertainty has on you weakens. Here's another truth about uncertainty. It's often where the best things in life come from. Think about it. Every meaningful relationship started with uncertainty. You didn't know if they'd like you, if it would work, if they'd stay. But you tried anyway. Every career move, every creative project, every adventure, they all began with not knowing. And that not knowing is what made them exciting. Because certainty is predictable, safe, but also stagnant. There's no growth in certainty. Growth requires risk, and risk requires uncertainty. So when you avoid uncertainty, you're also avoiding possibility. The people who live the most fulfilling lives aren't the ones who have everything figured out. They're the ones who've learned to be comfortable not knowing. They make decisions with incomplete information. They take leaps without guarantees. They trust the process even when they can't see the outcome. And they do this not because they're braver, but because they've learned that waiting for certainty is just another way of waiting forever. Because certainty, real certainty, never comes. There's always something unknown, always a variable you can't control, always a possibility you can't predict. So you make peace with that. You accept that life will always have question marks, and you move forward anyway. This doesn't mean you don't plan. Planning is useful. It gives structure, direction. But plans should be held loosely. Because the moment you attach your peace to a specific outcome, you set yourself up for suffering. Life rarely follows the script. It improvises. And if you're too rigid, you break. But if you're flexible, if you can adapt, if you can pivot when the plan changes, you flow. You bend, but don't break. That's the art of living with uncertainty. Planning without attachment. Hoping without expectation. Wanting without needing. Let me give you a practice for embracing uncertainty. When you feel the fear rising, when your mind starts spiraling with what-ifs, pause. Write down every fear, every worst-case scenario. Get it all out. Then next to each fear, write, and if this happens, I will handle it by fill in the blank. Because here's the truth. Even your worst-case scenarios are survivable. You might not want to face them, but you can. And when you write out the plan for handling them, they lose their power. The fear isn't the event itself. It's the belief that you can't handle it, but you can. You always have, and you always will. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it's also honest. It's life saying, I won't lie to you by pretending I'm predictable. And in that honesty, there's freedom. Because once you stop demanding that life be certain, you stop living in constant disappointment. You accept the nature of existence, fluid, dynamic, ever-changing. And you find peace not in controlling it, but in trusting yourself to navigate it. That trust is everything. It's the foundation of resilience, the core of courage, the heart of letting go. Because letting go doesn't mean you stop caring about the future. It means you stop trying to script it. You do your part. You show up. You try. And then you release the outcome. You trust that whatever unfolds is exactly what's supposed to. Even if you can't see why yet, uncertainty isn't the enemy. It's the invitation to live more fully, to trust more deeply, to release more freely. And when you accept that invitation, life stops being a problem to solve and becomes an experience to live. One unknown moment at a time. Let's continue. Chapter 6. Forgiving without forgetting. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts in human experience. People think it means you're saying what happened was okay, that you're excusing the behavior, that you're letting someone off the hook. But that's not forgiveness. That's erasure. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite the past. It releases its hold on the present. It's not about them. It's about you. It's the moment you decide that what they did will no longer define how you feel, will no longer control your peace, will no longer occupy space in your heart that belongs to joy. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. They've moved on. They're living their life. Maybe they don't even remember what they did. Or if they do, they don't care. But you're still carrying it, replaying it, letting it shape your thoughts, your moods, your relationships. You're giving someone who hurt you years ago power over your present. That's not justice. That's self-inflicted suffering. And the only person it's hurting is you. Forgiveness breaks that cycle. It says, what you did hurt me, and I'm not letting it hurt me anymore. But here's the part people get wrong. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. It doesn't mean you trust them again. It doesn't mean you let them back into your life. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. You can forgive someone and never speak to them again. You can forgive someone and still hold a boundary. You can forgive someone and still acknowledge that what they did was wrong. Forgiveness is internal. It's between you and your own heart. Reconciliation is external. It requires both people. And sometimes reconciliation isn't safe, isn't healthy, isn't possible. But forgiveness is always possible. Because it doesn't depend on them. It depends on you. I'll tell you about a woman named Sophia. She grew up with a father who was emotionally absent, critical, cold. He never said he loved her, never showed up to her events, never made her feel like she mattered. And that wound shaped her entire life. She spent decades searching for validation from men who couldn't give it. She chose partners who were emotionally unavailable because unavailability felt like home. She worked herself to exhaustion trying to prove she was worthy. And all the while, she hated her father. She told herself she'd never forgive him, that he didn't deserve it, that holding on to the anger was the only power she had. But the anger was eating her alive. She couldn't build healthy relationships because she was still fighting with her father in every interaction. She couldn't receive love because she didn't believe she deserved it. She couldn't find peace because peace required releasing the person she blamed for all her pain. One day, in therapy, her counselor said something that changed everything. Forgiveness isn't for him, it's for you. You're not letting him off the hook. You're releasing yourself from the prison of resentment. Sophia resisted. She argued. She clung to the anger because it felt like the only thing protecting her from being hurt again. But slowly, she began to see the truth. The anger wasn't protecting her. It was paralyzing her. So she made a choice. She forgave him. Not in person. He never knew. She did it quietly, in her own heart. She acknowledged what he did. She let herself feel the pain fully. And then she said, I release you. I release the expectation that you'll ever be the father I needed. I release the hope that you'll apologize. I release the belief that I need your validation to be whole. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I do. And when she did, something inside her unlocked. The weight lifted. The patterns broke. She started choosing different partners. She stopped overworking. She let love in because she was no longer carrying her father's failures as her own. That's the power of forgiveness. It doesn't change the past, but it changes you. It frees you from the endless loop of resentment. It stops the past from poisoning the present, and it gives you back the energy you've been spending on bitterness. Bitterness is expensive. It costs you your joy, your peace, your ability to connect. It makes you cynical, guarded, hard. And the person you're angry at, they're not paying that cost. You are. So forgiveness isn't about them. It's about refusing to let their actions continue to define your life. But forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. Memory is important. It's how you learn, how you protect yourself, how you set boundaries. Forgiving someone who hurt you doesn't mean you erase what they did. It means you remember without reliving. You acknowledge without absorbing. You learn without remaining wounded. You can say, that happened. It was wrong, and I'm not letting it happen again. That's wisdom. That's growth. That's healthy forgiveness. Forgetting would be dangerous. It would leave you vulnerable to the same harm. But remembering with forgiveness, that's empowered healing. There's a difference between forgiving and reconciling. Reconciliation requires mutual effort. It requires the other person to acknowledge their harm, change their behavior, and rebuild trust. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes people grow. Sometimes they apologize. Sometimes relationships heal, but often they don't. And that's okay. You can forgive someone who never apologizes. You can forgive someone who never changes. You can forgive someone who doesn't even think they did anything wrong, because your forgiveness doesn't depend on their awareness. It's a unilateral decision. You're releasing yourself from the emotional debt they owe you. You're saying, I don't need your apology to move on. I'm moving on anyway. This is especially important with people who will never give you what you need. Narcissists, abusers, toxic family members. They will never take responsibility, never show remorse, never make amends. And if you wait for them to give you closure, you'll wait forever. So you give it to yourself. You forgive them, not because they've earned it, but because you've earned your freedom. And holding on to the anger keeps you chained to them. Forgiveness is the key that unlocks the chains. Not for them, for you. There's a practice for this. It's called the forgiveness meditation. You sit quietly. You bring the person to mind. You feel the hurt. All of it. Don't suppress it. Let it surface. And then you say, either silently or aloud, I acknowledge what you did. I acknowledge the pain it caused. And I release you. I release my need for you to acknowledge it. I release my need for you to change. I release my need for you to apologize. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. You may need to repeat this daily, because forgiveness isn't always instant. It's a process, a practice. But each time you do it, the grip loosens, the anger softens, and eventually, you're free. Forgiveness also applies to yourself. In fact, that's often the hardest part. You can forgive others for their mistakes, but you crucify yourself for yours. You replay your failures endlessly. You hold yourself to impossible standards. You punish yourself for being human. But you are human. You've made mistakes. You've hurt people. You've fallen short. And that's okay. Not because the mistakes don't matter, but because you're allowed to be imperfect. You're allowed to learn. You're allowed to grow. Self-forgiveness is saying, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time, and now I know better, so I'll do better. Self-forgiveness doesn't mean you don't take responsibility. It means you stop punishing yourself after you've learned the lesson. The guilt has served its purpose when it's taught you what not to do. Beyond that, it's just self-harm. So you acknowledge the mistake. You make amends if possible. You commit to doing better. And then you let it go. You don't get to carry it as a life sentence. You've already served your time. Release yourself. Here's the truth about forgiveness. It's not a feeling. It's a decision. You don't wait until you feel forgiving. You decide to forgive, and the feelings follow. Eventually. Maybe not today. Maybe not next week. But eventually, the weight lifts. The resentment fades, and you realize that the person who hurt you no longer has power over you. You've taken it back, not by fighting them, but by releasing them. That's the art of forgiveness. Not forgetting, not excusing, just releasing. And in that release, you find something you thought you'd lost. Yourself. Let's move forward. Chapter 7. The myth of closure. There's a word people throw around when relationships end, when jobs disappear, when chapters close. Closure. I just need closure, they say, as if there's a magical conversation, a perfect explanation, a final moment that will make everything make sense. As if once they have that, they'll be able to move on. But here's the truth. Closure is a myth. It doesn't exist. Not the way people think it does. Because closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you give yourself. People spend years waiting for closure. Waiting for the person who left to explain why. Waiting for the company that fired them to acknowledge their value. Waiting for the friend who disappeared to come back and say what happened. They put their healing on hold, convinced that once they understand, once they receive that explanation, they'll be able to let go. But the explanation never comes. Or if it does, it's not satisfying. It doesn't bring the peace they expected. Because the real issue wasn't the lack of information. It was the lack of acceptance. You think you need to know why, but what you really need is to accept that it's over. Those are different things. Knowing why gives you information. Accepting that it's over gives you freedom. And you can have one without the other. In fact, most of the time, you have two. Because life doesn't come with explanations. People leave without saying goodbye. Opportunities disappear without warning. Plans fall apart without reason. And you're left standing there, holding a handful of whys that will never be answered. So what do? You answer them yourself. Closure is an inside job. It's the moment you stop waiting for someone else to finish your story, and you write the ending yourself. It's saying, I may never know why this happened, and I'm choosing to be okay with that. It's releasing the need for everything to make sense, because life doesn't always make sense. Sometimes things just are. And trying to force meaning onto something that doesn't have it only prolongs your pain. Sometimes the answer is, there is no answer, and that has to be enough. Let me tell you about a man named Thomas. He was in a relationship for 3 years. They talked about marriage, built a future together, and then she ended it. Suddenly, no warning, no explanation, just, I can't do this anymore. Thomas was devastated, not just because the relationship ended, but because he couldn't understand why. He reached out, called, texted, asked for a conversation, but she refused. She had moved on, and she wasn't interested in giving him the closure he desperately wanted. So Thomas spent months, then years, trying to figure it out on his own. He analyzed every conversation, every moment, searching for the clue he missed, the mistake he made, the reason it ended. But the more he searched, the more lost he became, because he was looking for an answer that didn't exist. The truth was, she didn't know why either. She just felt it. And feelings don't always come with explanations. Sometimes people leave because something inside them shifted, not because you did anything wrong, not because the relationship was bad, just because it no longer felt right. And that's not satisfying. It doesn't give you something to fix, someone to blame, a clear reason to point to. But it's the truth. And Thomas couldn't move on until he accepted it. One day, a friend asked him, "What if there is no reason? What if she just left because she did, and that's all there is?" Thomas resisted. He hated that idea, because it meant he'd wasted years searching for something that didn't exist. But it also meant he could stop searching. He could stop replaying. He could stop waiting for her to give him permission to move on. So he tried it. He said out loud, "Maybe there is no reason, and maybe that's okay." And for the first time in years, he felt lighter, not healed, not happy, but lighter, because he stopped carrying the weight of unanswered questions. He gave himself the closure she never could. That's the shift. Closure isn't about understanding. It's about acceptance. It's about saying, "This is what happened. I don't like it. I didn't choose it, but it's done. And I'm moving forward anyway." That's power. That's sovereignty. That's the moment you stop being a victim of your story and become the author of it. You're no longer waiting for someone else to write the ending. You're writing it yourself. And your ending doesn't need their input. It doesn't need their validation. It just needs your decision. Here's a hard truth. Most people don't want closure. They want reconciliation. They want the person to come back and say, "I was wrong. You were right. Let's try again." They want the job to call and say, "We made a mistake. Please come back." They want the past to undo itself. But closure isn't about going back. It's about moving forward. And moving forward means accepting that what's done is done, that the door is closed, that the chapter is over. And that's okay, because new doors open, new chapters begin, but only if you stop standing in the doorway of the old one. Closure also doesn't mean you stop caring. You can close a chapter and still love the people in it. You can move on and still honor what was. Closure isn't about erasing. It's about completing. It's saying, that part of my life mattered. It shaped me. It taught me. And now it's over. There's gratitude in that. There's respect, but there's also finality. And finality is what allows you to fully step into what's next. Because you can't be fully present in your current life if part of you is still living in the past. There's a ritual I recommend for creating your own closure. It's simple, but powerful. Take a piece of paper. Write a letter to the person, situation, or version of yourself you need to release. Write everything you wish you could say. Everything you wish they'd say to you. Don't hold back. Let it all out. Then read it aloud, to yourself, or to someone you trust, or to no one. Just speak the words. Let them leave your body, and then destroy the letter. Burn it. Tear it up. Bury it. Whatever feels right. As you watch it disappear, say, "I release this. It is complete. I am moving forward." That act of destruction is symbolic. It tells your subconscious, this is done. We are no longer holding this. And your subconscious listens. Closure is also about grieving. Because endings, even necessary ones, deserve to be mourned. You're allowed to be sad, that something is over, even if ending it was the right choice. You're allowed to miss someone, even if they hurt you. You're allowed to feel loss, even if what you lost wasn't good for you. Grief isn't logical, it's emotional. And emotions don't care about logic. So you let yourself feel it. You cry, you rage, you sit in the sadness, and then, slowly, you let it pass. Because grief, when allowed to move through you, doesn't stay forever. It comes in waves, and each wave leaves you a little lighter, a little more healed, a little more ready to move on. But if you skip the grief, if you bypass the pain and jump straight to "I'm fine," the closure never actually happens. You bury the emotion, and buried emotions don't die. They just wait underground, poisoning everything from below. So you feel it fully. You honor the loss. You give yourself permission to not be okay for a while. And then, when the grief has run its course, you stand up. You dust yourself off, and you close the door yourself, not because they gave you closure, but because you chose it. The myth of closure keeps people trapped, waiting, hoping, replaying. But the truth of closure sets you free, because the truth is, you don't need anyone's permission to move on. You don't need anyone's explanation to heal. You don't need the perfect ending to start the next chapter. You just need the courage to say, "This is over, and I'm okay with that." That's closure, not a moment, a decision. And once you make it, everything changes. Let's continue. Chapter 8. Building a life that doesn't need escape. Most people aren't running towards something. They're running from something. From stress, from monotony, from relationships that drain them, from jobs that don't fulfill them, from versions of themselves they no longer recognize. They fill their calendars with distractions. They scroll endlessly. They binge shows. They plan vacations to get away. And for a moment, it works. For a moment, they forget. But the moment they return, the weight returns with them. Because they're not escaping their circumstances. They're escaping themselves. And you can't outrun yourself. Wherever you go, there you are. The need to escape is a symptom. It's your soul telling you that something in your life is misaligned. That you're living in a way that doesn't honor who you are. That you're tolerating what you should be transforming. And no amount of vacations, substances, or distractions will fix that. Because the problem isn't external, it's internal. It's the gap between who you are and how you're living. And until you close that gap, the need to escape will haunt you. Because escape is temporary. Alignment is permanent. Building a life you don't need to escape from is the ultimate form of letting go. It's letting go of the idea that you have to suffer now to be happy later. Letting go of the belief that you have to endure what drains you. Letting go of the fear that choosing yourself is selfish. It's not selfish, it's survival. Because a life that requires constant escape is not a life. It's an endurance test, and you don't get a medal at the end. You just get exhausted. So what does a life without escape look like? It doesn't mean everything is perfect. It doesn't mean you're never stressed or challenged. It means that when you're stressed, it's stress that matters. It's stress from growth, from creation, from pursuing something meaningful. Not stress from tolerating what's beneath you. It means that when you wake up, you're not already dreading the day. You're not counting down to the weekend. You're present, engaged, alive. Not because your life is easy, but because it's aligned. Alignment starts with awareness. You have to look at your life honestly and ask, What am I tolerating that I shouldn't? B. What relationships drain me? What work numbs me? What habits diminish me? Write it down. All of it. The people who take more than they give. The job that pays the bills but kills your spirit. The patterns that keep you stuck. The versions of yourself you're performing to please others. Look at it all. Without judgment. Just observation. Because you can't change what you won't acknowledge. Then comes the hard part. Deciding what stays and what goes. Not everything can change overnight. Some things require time, planning, courage. But some things can change today. Today, you can stop answering calls from people who drain you. Today, you can set a boundary with someone who disrespects you. Today, you can say no to commitments that don't align with your values. Today, you can choose yourself, even in small ways. Because small choices, repeated daily, become the architecture of your life. Let me tell you about a woman named Nadia. She had what most people would call a successful life. Good job, nice apartment, stable relationship. But she was miserable. She woke up every day with a weight on her chest. She dreaded work. She felt disconnected from her partner. She spent her weekends recovering from her weeks, and she kept telling herself, "This is just how life is. Everyone feels this way." But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She knew people who loved their work, who felt energized by their relationships, who didn't need to escape their lives to feel alive. And she wanted that, but she didn't know how to get it. So she started small. She asked herself, what in my life is non-negotiable? What do I absolutely love? And what am I only tolerating? The answers surprised her. She loved writing. She'd always loved it. But she'd chosen a corporate career because it felt safe. She loved deep conversations. But her relationship had become surface level, filled with logistics and routines. She loved quiet mornings, but she rushed through them to meet expectations that weren't even hers. Once she saw this clearly, she couldn't unsee it. So she made changes. Slowly. She started waking up earlier to write. She had an honest conversation with her partner about their disconnection. She began looking for work that aligned with her passion. And with each change, the weight lifted. Not all at once, but gradually. Until one day, she woke up and realized she didn't want to escape anymore, because her life finally felt like hers. That's what alignment does. It removes the need for escape, because you're no longer living someone else's life. You're living yours. And your life, when it's truly yours, doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a privilege. Even the hard parts, even the challenges, because they're your challenges. Chosen, meaningful, aligned. Building a life you don't need to escape also means curating your environment, because your environment shapes you. If you're surrounded by negativity, you become negative. If you're surrounded by people who don't see you, you stop seeing yourself. If you're surrounded by chaos, you become chaotic. Environment isn't neutral. It's influential. And you're not a tree. You can move. You can change. You can choose different spaces, different people, different energy. Start with your physical space. Look around. Does your home feel like a sanctuary or a storage unit? Does it reflect who you are or who you used to be? Create space that nourishes you. Declutter. Simplify. Add things that bring you peace. Because your outer environment mirrors your inner state. When your space is chaotic, your mind feels chaotic. When your space is intentional, your mind feels clear. Then look at your relationships. Who lifts you? Who drains you? Who sees the best in you? Who brings out the worst? You don't have to cut everyone off, but you do have to be honest about who gets your energy. Because your energy is finite, and you're allowed to be selective about where it goes. Finally, look at how you spend your time. Are you doing things that matter to you or things that matter to others? Are you creating or consuming? Are you growing or maintaining? Time is the one resource you can't get back, and every hour you spend on something that doesn't align is an hour you'll never reclaim. So be ruthless with your time. Protect it like it's sacred, because it is. Building a life you don't need to escape also requires letting go of the need for external validation, because as long as your worth is tied to what others think, you'll always be performing. And performance is exhausting. It's a life built on approval, and approval is fickle. It changes. It disappears. It's never enough. But when you validate yourself, when you know your worth independent of others, you stop performing. You start being. And being is effortless. This doesn't mean you don't care what people think. It means their opinions don't define you. You listen. You consider. But you don't collapse under their judgment. You don't reshape yourself to fit their expectations. You stay rooted in who you are, and the right people will see you. The wrong ones won't, and that's okay, because you're not for everyone. No one is. And trying to be is the fastest way to lose yourself. Here's a practice. Every week, ask yourself 3 questions. What brought me joy this week? What drained me this week? What do I want more of? And what do I want less of? Then adjust. Make small changes based on the answers. More of what lights you up, less of what dims you. Over time, these small adjustments compound, and you wake up one day in a life that feels like home. Building a life you don't need to escape isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about making choices that honor who you are, not who you think you should be. It's about releasing the obligations that don't serve you and embracing the things that do. It's about creating space for joy, for growth, for peace. Not someday. Now. Because life is happening now. And if you're spending it waiting for the weekend, planning the next vacation, counting down to retirement, you're not living. You're enduring. And you deserve more than that. So start today. Start small. Start where you are. But start. Because the life you don't need to escape from, it's not waiting for you. It's waiting to be built by you. Let's move forward. Chapter 9. The Practice of Non-Attachment. There's a teaching in Eastern philosophy that sounds paradoxical to Western ears. Hold everything lightly. Love deeply, but without clinging. Want fully, but without needing. Care intensely, but without attachment. It sounds impossible. How can you love something and not hold on to it? How can you want something and be okay if it doesn't come? How can you care without becoming consumed? The answer lies in understanding the difference between love and attachment. Love is open. Attachment is closed. Love says, I want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me. Attachment says, I need you to make me happy. Love is spacious. Attachment is suffocating. Love allows. Attachment controls. Most of what we call love is actually attachment. It's need disguised as affection. It's fear disguised as devotion. We say we love someone, but what we really mean is we need them. We need them to validate us, to complete us, to stay with us. And when they don't, we fall apart. Not because love died, but because the attachment was exposed. True love doesn't fall apart, because it was never dependent on the other person staying. It was a choice, a gift, a way of being, and it remains intact regardless of the outcome. Attachment, on the other hand, crumbles the moment things change, because attachment is conditional. It says, I love you as long as you meet my needs, as long as you stay, as long as you don't change. But people change, circumstances change, and attachment, being rigid, breaks under the pressure. Non-attachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care without clinging. It means you love without owning. It means you give without expecting. It's one of the hardest practices to master because it requires you to hold two truths simultaneously. I care deeply about this, and I'm okay if it doesn't go my way. Most people can't do that. They swing between two extremes. Either they care too much and become attached, or they care too little and become detached. But non-attachment is the middle path. It's full engagement without dependency. It's wanting without needing. It's presence without possession. Let me tell you about a teacher I once knew. His name was Arjun. He had a garden he loved. He spent hours tending it, watering the plants, pruning the branches, watching things grow. One day, a storm came through and destroyed half the garden. Plants uprooted, flowers scattered, months of work gone. His students expected him to be devastated, but he wasn't. He looked at the destruction and said, "The garden was beautiful. I enjoyed caring for it, and now it's gone. That's okay. I'll plant again." His students were confused. "How can you be so calm?" they asked. And he smiled. "Because I loved the garden. I didn't need it. I enjoyed the process of caring for it. The outcome was never in my control. So when it changed, I didn't break. I adapted." That's non-attachment. Loving fully without gripping tightly. Caring deeply without needing specific outcomes. It's the ability to invest yourself completely in something and still be okay if it doesn't last. Because the value wasn't in the permanence. It was in the presence, the experience, the love you gave, not the guarantee it would stay. This is especially important in relationships. We enter relationships with agendas, with expectations, with needs, and we attach our worth to how the relationship unfolds. If it lasts, we're successful. If it ends, we're failures. But that's not how love works. Love is not a transaction. It's an experience. And experiences, by nature, are temporary. Some last a lifetime. Some last a season. But their length doesn't determine their value. When you practice non-attachment in relationships, you stop trying to control the other person. You stop needing them to be a certain way. You stop fearing they're leaving. Because you know that love isn't about possession. It's about appreciation. You appreciate them for who they are. You enjoy the time you share. And you trust that if they need to leave, that's their path. Not a reflection of your worth, not evidence of failure, just their journey. And you honor that, even if it hurts. Because non-attachment doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you don't make the pain mean something it doesn't. Non-attachment also applies to outcomes. We attach our happiness to specific results. We say, "I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I find the relationship, when I achieve the goal." But that's conditional happiness, and conditional happiness is fragile because you're handing your peace to circumstances you can't control. Non-attachment says, "I want this. I'm working toward it. But my happiness doesn't depend on it happening. I'm okay either way." That's freedom. Because now, you're no longer a hostage to outcomes. You're fully engaged in the process without being enslaved by the result. There's a story from the Bhagavad Gita that illustrates this. A warrior named Arjuna is about to go into battle, but he's paralyzed by fear. Fear of losing. Fear of killing people he loves. Fear of the outcome. And his teacher, Krishna, tells him something profound. You have the right to your actions, but not to the fruits of your actions. Do your duty without attachment to success or failure. In other words, focus on what you can control, your effort, your intention, your integrity. But release the outcome, because the outcome is not yours to control. When you live this way, you're no longer burdened by results. You do your best. You show up fully, and then you let go. Whatever happens, happens, and you're okay. This is where most people struggle. They think non-attachment means not trying, but it's the opposite. Non-attachment allows you to try harder because you're no longer paralyzed by fear of failure. You're no longer holding back to protect yourself. You give everything. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, you learn. Either way, you're free. Because your worth isn't tied to the outcome. It's tied to the integrity of your effort. Non-attachment also means releasing the need for things to be permanent. We cling to people, places, jobs, identities, because we want them to last forever. But nothing lasts forever. Everything is temporary. Relationships end. Jobs change. Bodies age. Identities evolve. And the more you cling to permanence, the more you suffer, because you're fighting the nature of existence itself. When you accept impermanence, everything changes. You stop taking things for granted. You appreciate what's here while it's here. You don't waste time wishing things were different. You fully experience them as they are, because you know they won't last. And that knowledge makes them more precious, not less. When you hug someone you love, you hug them fully, not because you know they'll be there forever, but because you know nothing is guaranteed. That's non-attachment. It doesn't distance you from life. It brings you closer. Because you're no longer clinging, you're experiencing. Here's a practice for cultivating non-attachment. Identify something you're attached to. Maybe it's a relationship, a goal, an identity, an outcome. Then ask yourself, why am I attached to this? What do I believe it'll give me? Usually, the answer is something like security, validation, happiness, worth. Then ask, can I give myself these things without this external source? Can I feel secure without this relationship? Can I validate myself without this achievement? Can I be happy regardless of this outcome? The answer is always yes. You can. You've just been outsourcing your inner needs to external sources. Non-attachment is bringing those needs home, meeting them yourself, so that you want things, but you don't need them. You enjoy things, but you're not destroyed when they change. Non-attachment is liberation. It's the freedom to love without fear, to try without desperation, to care without collapse. It's the art of being fully alive without being controlled by life. And once you taste that freedom, you never go back. Because clinging is exhausting, but presence is effortless. And presence is where life actually happens, not in the guarantees, in the moments. Let's continue. Chapter 10. Coming home to yourself. After all the letting go, after all the releasing, after all the practice, you arrive somewhere unexpected. You arrive back to yourself, not a new self, not an improved self, your original self, the one that existed before the world told you who to be, before the wounds taught you to protect, before the expectations taught you to perform. you come home. And home, you realize, was never a place. It was never a person. It was never an achievement. It was always you. The quiet, steady, unchanging awareness beneath everything else. Most people spend their entire lives searching for home outside themselves, in relationships, in success, in validation, in belonging. They move from person to person, job to job, place to place, thinking, maybe this will be it. Maybe this will make me feel whole. But it never does. Not permanently. Because you can't find yourself in someone else. You can't find peace in external validation. You can't find home in anything that can be taken away. Home is what remains when everything else is stripped away. And coming home to yourself is realizing that you were never lost. You were just distracted. This journey of letting go has been about removing the distractions, letting go of the need to control, letting go of resentment, letting go of people who've already left, letting go of outcomes you can't force, letting go of the past, letting go of the need for external closure, letting go of attachment. Each release was a layer removed, and beneath all those layers is you, clear, whole, complete. You didn't need to become someone new. You just needed to remember who you've always been. Coming home to yourself feels quiet. It's not dramatic. There's no fireworks, no grand revelation. It's subtle, like walking into a familiar room after years away. Everything feels right, familiar, safe. You're no longer performing, no longer proving, no longer running. You're just here, being. And that's enough. When you come home to yourself, you stop looking for completion in others. You realize you were never incomplete. You were whole all along. Relationships become enrichment, not rescue. Love becomes sharing, not needing. Connection becomes choice, not desperation. And the people who stay in your life are there because they enhance what's already whole, not because they're filling what's empty. Because nothing is empty. You are full. You've always been full. You just forgot. Coming home also means accepting all of yourself, the parts you love and the parts you hide, the strengths and the flaws, the light and the shadow. You stop performing the good version and rejecting the bad version. You see that both are you. Both are human. Both belong. And when you accept yourself fully, without conditions, you stop seeking acceptance from others. Not because you don't care what they think, but because their opinion is no longer the source of your worth. You are. You've come home to your own approval, and that approval is unshakable. Let me tell you about a moment I had years ago. I was sitting alone in a quiet room. No music, no distractions, just me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to be anywhere else. I wasn't planning. I wasn't worrying. I wasn't replaying. I was just there, present. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything in my life was perfect. It wasn't. But because I was no longer at war with myself. I wasn't fighting who I was. I wasn't resisting what I felt. I wasn't wishing I was different. I was just me. And that was enough. That was the moment I came home. Coming home to yourself also means trusting yourself again, trusting your intuition, your decisions, your path. For so long, you've second-guessed yourself. You've asked everyone else what you should do. You've sought advice, validation, permission. But now you realize, you know. You've always known. The answers were never out there. They were always in here. And when you trust that, when you stop outsourcing your inner knowing, You move through life with a confidence that's unshakable, not because you have all the answers, but because you trust yourself to find them. This doesn't mean you never ask for help. It doesn't mean you isolate. It means you consult others from a place of clarity, not confusion. You seek perspectives, not permission. You listen to advice, but you make your own decisions because you're home. And when you're home, you don't need someone else to tell you which direction to go. You feel it, you know it, and you trust it. Coming home to yourself is also about releasing the masks, the personas you created to fit in, to be liked, to be accepted. You've worn so many versions of yourself that you almost forgot which one was real. But now you're done performing. You let the masks fall, and underneath, you find someone beautiful, someone authentic, someone real. And that person, that true self, is who you've been searching for all along. When you show up as yourself, fully, unapologetically, something magical happens. The right people see you. The right opportunities find you. The right life unfolds. Not because you forced it, but because you aligned with it. You stopped trying to be who you thought you should be and started being who you are. And authenticity, it turns out, is magnetic. It attracts what's meant for you and repels what's not. And both are blessings. Coming home to yourself is also about finding stillness, not the stillness of inactivity, the stillness of inner peace. You can be busy, productive, engaged in life, and still have stillness inside. Because stillness isn't about what you're doing. It's about how you're being. It's the calm beneath the activity, the quiet beneath the noise, the peace beneath the chaos. And once you find that stillness, it becomes your anchor. No matter what's happening around you, you remain centered because you've come home, and home is where the stillness lives. Here's what I want you to know. You are not broken. You never were. You've been through things. You've been hurt. You've made mistakes. You've lost things. But none of that broke you. It shaped you. It taught you. It brought you here. And here, you are whole. You are enough. You are home. And coming home doesn't mean your journey is over. It means you're finally starting from a place of wholeness instead of lack. You're no longer searching for what's missing. You're building from what's already here. And what's here is everything you need. So take a breath. Feel your heartbeat. Notice the stillness beneath the noise. That's home. That's you. Welcome back. You've been missed, not by others, by yourself. And now that you're here, now that you've come home, everything changes. Because when you're grounded in yourself, nothing can shake you. When you're rooted in your own worth, no one can diminish you. When you're home, finally, truly home, you're free. And freedom, it turns out, was the destination all along. This is where the journey of letting go leads, not to emptiness, to fullness, not to loss, to liberation, not to the end, to the beginning of a life lived from the inside out, from wholeness, from presence, from home. And once you're here, you realize you never needed to hold on so tightly, because what's yours will stay, what's not will go. And either way, you'll be okay, because you have yourself, and that, more than anything else, is enough.